I wanted to say first that the plan was to have this as the first in a series, and we were not able to get either a local Huachumero to participate or somebody from a Huniquin family. So in the future, we will have the next one focusing on the kind of complex relationship around Western practitioners and indigenous. For this one, I'm going to speak first because, in a way, it was my idea. I came up with the organization. I asked everybody to come together, and it's focused on a more specific theme, which is something that's kind of close to my heart, and I've also written about, which is how this desire, which I think is very innate in our soul for awakening, can often be hijacked and captured and put through certain detours that are putting us through time lags or preventing or putting obstacles in front of us. So my understanding, based on my own experience, is that as human beings, we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. So if you think of the creation myths that have been in different cultures, there's this idea that there's this unnameable divine source, and as it steps down into manifestation, it begins to fragment into fractals. And those fractals are divine qualities. They may be the quality of justice or truth, or of love, or of courage. And as those fractals go even deeper into manifestation, if you think of the tree of life, it goes through certain stages. As it keeps going down, it hits certain obstacles. So those divine qualities begin to fragment even more and to become distortions of themselves. So for example, if you have the quality of love that wants to express as loving others, as being loved, when it hits those distortions, it could become something like seeking approval. So through all of these distortions, we get to where we are in the present, which is Malkut in the Kabbalistic system, which is this material incarnation, this body, all of the traumas we've had in childhood, all of the baggage that we've brought in karmically. And when we are approaching something, it's usually from that perspective, from one of those subpersonalities, from one of those fragments. And the journey is called, in the Kabbalistic system and in other Western esotericisms, the path of return. So what we are doing is we are going back up. And as we are going back up that scale, there are some things that are obstacles because it's just in the nature of that fragmentation that we have those distortions and those wounds. And those distortions and wounds are also preyed upon by certain forces that want to keep us off track, wants to keep us off this path of awakening. So that was initially the proposal or the idea for this. So what I wanted to speak about through my own experience is some of those, both those truths and those beauties as I've experienced them, but also some of those distortions. And I wanted to say first that I'm very grateful for the training that I had with ayahuasca, which has opened up incredible vistas to me. And also to confess that at some point I felt like I had gotten the message enough and it was time to hang up the phone. What I've experienced in my own path is that if you think of the term entheogens, it's about this opening to the divine, which can happen. So these plant medicines can be portals in which we connect not to thought forms of what we think the divine is, but to the actual thread that's coming down that line of manifestation. But it is actually, in truth, an opening, a portal to the astral world. And in that astral world, we can meet many different things, some of which are our own thought forms, some of which are thought forms connected to strings that are still in the astral, that are some in the lower astral, some in the higher, but they're not in the higher realms. So if I can give an example, when I started training, one of the first experiences that I had when I asked for beings of light was these very blonde Pleiadian looking figures that told me how special I was and that they were going to be my guide and that they were going to show me certain things, and I felt like something is off. And I asked if they were there for my highest interest, and they disappeared. And I think it's important to have this kind of discernment. And you can tell because if you're getting these visions in like wild technicolor, you're in the astral. So in the Kabbalistic system, you can distinguish between the real thread that's coming from above, because those encounters are not visual. They're not visual. Intuition doesn't function that way. So if you have like this overwhelming sense of energy and almost like seeing a light behind something, this is much more of approximation to an encounter with the real entity that is there for your highest good, and you can always pose the question. And after I had several of these encounters, which I felt were with false light or with different kind of entities, and I was telling this at our last meeting, when I asked for the highest being of light that I could access, I got Christ. And at the first I was like, no, not this guy, this is not my tradition, I have nothing to do with this. And I understood at the beginning that it was an archetype that I was working with, an archetype of unconditional love, of surrender, but not just an archetype in the astral, that there was this thread that was coming from above, that I was having an encounter with this real presence. And I wanted to mention this because you can have very different experiences depending on your readiness, your preparation, what you're bringing to the experience. And this brings me to a second point that I wanted to make, that in a lot of the ancient traditions, entheogens were seen as sacraments, as initiations that came after certain periods of preparation, which were very long and very intense. So after you knew how to stabilize your energy, how to work with certain things, there were ways of bringing you to a higher truth. And in a sense, for the people that didn't have that preparation, they had no business going there. So it's quite a different context in which we're living today, and this is not just in the Western esoteric system, but also in the Eastern, in which there's lots of stories about Soma and, how a lot of Buddhist monks were consuming mushrooms and different things. But it was after a certain level of preparation, after knowing how to do the shadow work in a way, how to work with your own energy, how to stabilize, that those experiences were brought to bring to a higher level. And I think this is really missing today, and it's because of this that there is this lack of discernment. And you have people like this video that I shared with this woman who came to Pisac to drink ayahuasca with the shaman so she can communicate with the aliens about the pyramids. You don't know what you're going to get in the astral. If you don't have the discernment to be able to feel if that entity that is communicating with you is a higher truth and is coming from a higher order, you're going to get pulled in all kinds of different directions. And this is, kind of an in-between situation. The worst situations is that people can actually get hijacked and possessed. And I've seen several of these stories. I didn't want to go into detail, but one of the people who I've worked with for many years actually committed suicide a few weeks ago. And it was obvious to those of us that knew her that something was going on. She went to Colombia, she did ayahuasca with a lot of people who took advantage and abused her. And, there's different levels, so the worst case scenario can be quite bad. And I think this is why it's important to bring back this idea that this is something special. This is a sacrament, a form of initiation, and there is, levels and stages of preparation that can be beneficial to go through. And I'm just going to make the third point and then pass it on. I think another feature that is part of not just the matrix surrounding psychedelics, but spirituality as a whole, is this tendency, which is a result of commodification, to have this quest for more, to consume more. I'm going to do one more, and the next one will be the bigger one, and then finally I'm going to do the really big one, and the really big one is going to leap me into enlightenment. So there's this tendency to keep consuming in the outside, and it's this seeking tendency. And what I received as my own insight after a long time of training and after many encounters is that those feeling states and those insights and those epiphanies that came as the result of this encounter with Madre Ayahuasca was not the encounter with Madre Ayahuasca. It was actually the portal to my higher self. And the last insight and message that I received is after this death journey, which was extremely profound and lasted like 3 days of rebirth, was that everything that I experienced I could do on my own. And that the important thing is to have that connection as a daily connection to this higher self, to this, and the higher self I think of as the soul, and the spirit is something a bit different, but to have this connection in which every day you're receiving this guidance and you know that it's true. And if you have that, the practices and the path and everything else will follow. So that last message was extremely profound for me, and it influenced the way in which I work with myself and others, because I see it as a kind of stepping down. You know, the feeling states and the insights that I got from that work, I transferred into meditations and breath work, which in many cases were very similar to the ayahuasca experience. And I thought, you know, this is really groovy. I can really do this on my own. But actually, no, I couldn't. And whatever states I achieved in those meditations and out-of-body experiences are also not the real thing. The real thing is to be able to transfer that to how you live every day with your eyes open, to how you interact with others. You can call it mindfulness or something else, but to be able to be in that presence in which you know how to lucid dream through life. So having seen how to lucid dream through ayahuasca experiences and through my own meditations, it's like the real step down is to be able to live that every day, in every moment, in ordinary encounters and things that are not out of the ordinary. So I think this, for me, is the real focus and the beauty of this work, that it needs to be stepped down and to be able to receive those insights. And once you've gotten them, you know, like Alan Watts said, you have gotten the message enough times, you can hang up the phone, because it can become a trap. And this I also understood in the last experience that I had, and I thought of Castaneda and also Mircea Eliade, who said something similar. That and I think Castaneda, when he's speaking through Don Juan or the other way around, and maybe it's doubtful which, says something like, there used to be these old seers, and they had these powers of seeing. They could see what was off, and you know, they could see the future. They could see many things. They had this direct connection to this thread that was coming from above, from source consciousness, and they lost that connection because of a certain kind of fall. They got corrupted by power. And once they lost that connection, they went and they hid in the mountains and in the forest, and there they discovered the plants. And the plants allowed them to get that connection again. So the plants functioned as a way of self-remembering, but it was also a trap, because the self-remembering is meant to be temporary. And in a way, they kept using the plants in order to get that power. And Eliade says something similar about the shamans that need psychedelics to go into trance. It's because they can't achieve the trance on their own. So I think the important thing to remember is that, you know, although these plant medicines are beautiful and they can give us that experience of self-remembering, what they are teaching us is that everything is within. So there's some point on that climb up the ladder in which, you know, you can say it's enough, and now, you know, I've received those messages and I can do it on my own. So those were the 3 things that I wanted to mention. And I think everybody has different experiences, and what we had on the table for discussion were several things, including the kind of ego inflation that can happen after communing with these spirits, and also the commodification, which is making it a very different experience now than it was even in the 1970s or 80s. and this uneasy alliance between the Western practitioners and the indigenous, which can be in different forms of self-colonization, of appropriation, or of genuine syncretism, where these traditions are brought together because they each have something to show and they bear upon each other. So although I had a plan initially, when we were talking outside, we said, let's just get rid of it, and let's speak by whoever feels called to pick up the thread next. So if there's any immediate questions, you can ask now. If not, we'll just pass it on and be surprised. Okay. So whoever wants to pick up the thread.
I'll go. Okay. Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm coming with a background in Western esotericism and esoteric entheogenic Christianity. I study Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, and I also practice the Santo Daime. I don't know those who don't know, Santo Daime is an entheogenic Christian Hermetic lineage where we work with ayahuasca, but it's consecrated as a Christian sacrament. So I want to talk about the Western lineage of entheogenic science. Entheogens have always been used in the West as a sacrament of the divine science, and there's always been an unbroken tradition of how to work with these tools and these sacraments according to this divine science. And so I see basically two main themes or two main lineages. There's various indigenous lineages that are passed on through ancestry, and there's various indigenous lineages, and then there's a kind of Western lineage, but the Western lineage is hidden. It's occulted and it's very secretive. It's surrounded in secrecy, and there's a long history of persecution, which from the church. So this underscores the reasons and the birth of the esoteric impulse to hide these things. So the Western lineage traces its lineage back to the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, and you can even go further and say it goes back to Atlantis. But let's just say, starting with Egypt, these were entheogenic schools of initiation, and there was a very profound and elaborated divine science surrounding this process of initiation. And there was, as Ariel was saying, there was always a probationary period, or an actual a very serious period of preparation to prepare for the actual event of initiation. And the event of initiation was an entheogenic event, and something very specific happens in the higher bodies when this happens. And the preparation was absolutely essential. And in the ancient mysteries, there was also people were chosen. It wasn't everybody could just walk into the pyramid and demand some mushrooms and get initiated, or they were chosen based on their level of kind of perceived maturity and readiness. Now this condition is changing in the times we're living in now, and that actually has profound implications, very profound implications. But in the history of entheogenic initiation, it was a very serious and very secretive thing. And this was passed on in unbroken chains, and you had these bearers of this divine science that were always initiating. So there was always those who had been already initiated who could guide the initiate safely through the process. So that's really important to understand, that in the West we've always had that, but then you have this 2,000 years ago, the advent of the Christ impulse and the Christ manifestation on earth. And then this happened in the context of mystery schools. And so something that not a lot of people know, because this was actually concealed and this knowledge was persecuted by the church, was that there was actually a lineage of entheogenic Christianity. And this was another initiation school, another a tradition of entheogenic initiation. But this was badly hijacked. And so there was this impulse on earth that was kind of attacking entheogenic impulses and trying to dismantle and destroy this unbroken lineage of this divine science. And so this gave rise to esotericism, which is very quintessentially Western. The Western shamanic lineage, I say it's a Western shamanic lineage. People say, oh, the West doesn't have a shamanic lineage. But it does, it's just evolved in this direction of esotericism. And so this is like surrounded by secrecy and occultism, and secret societies eventually gave rise to the phenomenon of secret societies. And so when people today feel this innate call to initiation, and they feel something deep in their soul that's calling them to an entheogenic initiation. Normally in North America or Europe or South America, they go seeking and they find mushrooms. It's usually the first major entheogen, or cannabis. And they have experiences on their own without elderhood, without guidance, without a mentor. And you can go so far on your own, and there's a certain protection up to a certain point on your own. But then at a certain point, I personally feel that at a certain point it's necessary to find lineage and elderhood to guide, because there's in initiation, there's these thresholds that we have to pass. It's like when we're going and being initiated into the spiritual world, there's these thresholds. It's not just one world, like boom, we enter, we take the entheogen, we're in the spirit world. It's like a complex world, and there's various thresholds. And first of all, we need orientation about the cartography of these worlds. Like there's thresholds, there's beings that protect the thresholds, there's tricksters that deceive us with their own shadows. There's all sorts of things that we need to be aware of as we're navigating. And it's the elders who have this divine science, that are bearers of this divine science, that give us the keys to cross over the thresholds. So this was very badly attacked in the West. Like the elderhood, like entheogenic shamanic elderhood, was like severely persecuted. And so Westerners growing up today, they feel this like this innate call to entheogenic initiation, but they don't know where to go for elderhood. They intuitively sense, I really need an elder, a shaman of some sort to initiate me properly, because it's dangerous. I respect this is very serious. And they don't know where to go. There's no like indigenous Westerners. So we're in this situation where we go to indigenous peoples who have unbroken chains, who have the divine science still, who haven't lost it. But this brings in another complication, because I feel that the impulse of initiation emerges, and those who feel called to be initiated, it's to be of service to their civilization. And so the way that we get trained to be of service to our civilization is really contingent on the unique karma of our civilization and the unique wounds and traumas of our civilization. So to use the metaphor of shamanism, like each shamanic individual, I don't think that shamans can only be like indigenous people. I think it's an archetypal phenomenon, and it emerges in different cultures with different expressions, but it follows the same archetypal structure. And it usually begins like with a crisis. There's like some sort of wound that needs to be healed, some sort of illness that needs to be healed. The candidate goes on a journey to heal this wound, and they go through a kind of soul retrieval process. They retrieve what's missing, they heal this wound, and then they become specialists in addressing this unique wound. And so Westerners have a unique wound. Westerners have faced the persecution of shamanic wisdom, the persecution of entheogenic wisdom, and we've lost elderhood, and we've like kind of experienced deep soul loss, because the mystical Gnostic direct communion mysteries have been removed, and we've been given this like materialism and all sorts of, it's getting even worse and worse now. So we have this wound where we need to go and retrieve a direct connection. And so in order to like achieve that, we're looking for entheogens, but we don't know where to find our elderhood. So one of the things that I like to emphasize is that Westerners really do have an entheogenic lineage in what we call Hermeticism and alchemy. If you look at the work of the alchemists, most people don't realize that alchemists were the specialists in entheogens. They were taking entheogens and developing a divine science of what happens to your soul when you do this, and these stages of transformation that you engage in when you take these entheogens. And they had a doctrine. It's the doctrine of the great work, the doctrine of the philosopher's stone. This is a doctrine of doing alchemy on your higher body so that you can achieve this kind of initiatory state. So there's an actual objective to using entheogens, and there's a successful process of working with it, but on the other side there's actually like full of dangers. and we really rely on elders to protect us from these dangers. So Westerners are like, we don't have Western elders of our own, but when we go to indigenous elders, they have this shamanic impulse that was born and evolved out of the needs of their civilization, out of the traumas of their civilization. So I feel that there's this phenomenon of like shamanic identity crisis, where we go and we train with shamans from different civilizations, and then we do our best earnestly to try to like plant it in our Western civilization, but something is missing, because shamanism ought to really emerge out of the civilization that it's meant to serve. Because that's how the impulse evolves. Like, there's a crisis in the tribe, and like the shaman is the one who solves that crisis and becomes a healer for that group with that specific problem. So I feel that we're really in this like identity crisis situation, where Westerners feeling the shamanic calling to be entheogenically initiated don't know where to go. There's nothing in the West, and it's complicated with indigenous cultures. And so we're looking, and we're trying our best, but now we have this phenomenon of charlatanism that's emerging, where now we have like people that are self-initiated, and this is the first time in the history of humanity where entheogens are widely available to basically anybody that wants to try them. This has never been the case. It's always been very fiercely guarded secret knowledge. And you can be killed even if you were like speaking about it like openly. It was very seriously guarded, at least in the Western mystery schools. And this is the first time in history that entheogens are widely available, but there's no like initiatic traditions to make sure that people are prepared. Now people can show up like, I wanna try ayahuasca, and then they walk down the streets of Pisac and they find a shaman that very same day, and that night they're drinking ayahuasca, and like, it is extremely dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. And like we can get into the science. I don't know if we're going to get into this, but there's this whole science of like the deceptions that we have to face when we haven't done enough shadow work, where we're carrying our own unconscious shadows into the experience. Our own shadows get animated, and then they confront us, and we think they're entities. And there's all sorts of discernment that's needed, that we really rely on elders to give us and help us with this. So, but I just want to impress the importance of understanding that the West really does have its own indigenous, like Western entheogenic lineage, but it has this long history of being occulted and being distorted and being attacked. And so it went underground, and now is this time to kind of like reclaim it. And this is kind of where my own work comes in, and this is what I've dedicated a lot of my life to, is like reclaiming this kind of Rosicrucian, alchemical, entheogenic lineage for the science of initiation. So that's what I want to say. Thank you. That's funny.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk next. My name is Janet Jaramillo. I'm from Ecuador, and I've been walking this medicine path for, should I put it here? Just a little bit. So I've been walking the medicine path for 14 years. I came to Peru in 2010, and immediately I started living at an ayahuasca healing center. And yeah, I feel my heart beating very fast. So where I come from is from this intersection between plant medicine and Buddhist practices. So I've been a Buddhist for the past 10 years. I have trained with Jack Cornfield and Tara Brach in mindfulness. And I've been working in an organization called Lotus Vine Journeys, who merges these practices of awakening, practices of being present, practices of embodiment into the view of how we work with plant medicine. The first 3 years that I work with ayahuasca at a very famous, I live at a very famous ayahuasca healing center named the Temple of the Way of Light. So I had all this incredible awakening experience, a lot of healing experience, but I didn't realize until I went to my first 10 days meditation retreat, I didn't realize how much my mind was actually blocking the real healing experience, meaning there is a lot of that we think our minds is real, and not all the time our thoughts are something that we should listen and follow. So since I've been following this the Buddhist path, this has allowed me to connect to this wisdom of the body, the embodied wisdom, and to just observe, to be an observer of the mind. And I take these teachings to the way I work with the medicine. Something that is very important for me is in the Buddhist path, the main reason, the main purpose of the Buddhist path is to create less suffering, is to heal from suffering, heal the suffering of the world. And that is how I approach the medicines. I am not interested much in, like, let's say the spirit world looks like this, look like that, because who knows? The spirit world is subjective. If you go to one tradition, they will tell you this is like this is like that, this is like that. If you go to another tradition, you have something very different. In the Buddhist tradition, at the end of the day, is your mind. And the way to connect to it, as I do, is through observing consciousness when I am in the medicine path. But even that is not the most important for me. So the most important for me is how these plants, how these incredible substances can support the healing of humanity. And this is important for me because we could see it around. We are in a state where we have lost our connection to nature, we have lost our connection to the divine. Humanity is in a very sad state. There is a lot of sickness. There is a lot of sickness in the Western world. So, as I have worked for the past 8 years facilitating and supporting people, I have seen so many miracles, from people healing from depressions, from suicides, to people connecting one another from heart to heart. And I feel like even though we have, and this is imperfect, the way that Western people are coming to indigenous tradition is not perfect. The way that we are coming to these plants without the initiations that perhaps like back 50, 60, 100 years in the jungle we would have had is imperfect. However, the way that I see it is that even though we are lacking certain very important steps, there is a call from people to come into the jungle and heal. Even if it's curiosity, there is a call that I feel is beyond an intellectual call. Is this call from a part of ourselves, let's call it the subconscious, let's call it the heart, let's call it the spirit, that wants to connect to something deeper, that wants to connect to something that is meaningful, that wants to connect to nature. In my point of view, in my view, I feel like the natural world is emerging, and these plants are emerging into our consciousness and are becoming, for better or worse, I think for better, they are coming into consciousness and into accessibility to people because we need them. Because we need something that can support our awakening of the heart, that can support this connection to divine around us, to divine within us. And my most, back in the days, I worked with Shipibos for many, many years, and back in the days in the Shipibo people, 100 years ago, just the shaman will drink the medicine. The rest of the people will be sitting in ceremony, and the shaman will be like, okay, you do this, I see this, I clean this, I do that. And it will be very not the usual to have to drink, to give medicine to other people. This has changed. Now we all can drink medicine, and I personally appreciate that because it has helped me so much. I feel that there is a reason why these things happen. And there is a reason why we all, if the people here have access to medicine, I think many of you would have gratitude for the access that we had to these substances. What is important for me is how, as imperfect this is, as lack of lineages, as confusing this could be, how can I make it more safe? How can I make it more, with more honoring the indigenous tradition? How can these substances can be serving so they are not, how these substances can serve us as humans to heal, because there is a deep sickness in humanity, and these substances, I truly believe this, when treated with respect, when treated in an environment that is supportive, can heal and support and help us move through traumas so much faster. I had the luck, I've been very lucky, of have been following the Buddhist paths very closely for many years and have been participating. I have had the time and the resources to participate in long, long retreats, 3 months retreat in silence. And the healing is incredible, 3 months retreat in silence, all day, meditating from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. over and over and over again. And not many people have this lucky, the time, the resources, and the healing that you can experience going through this time of period of deep meditation is a lot, but you need months and months and months of practice. With the medicine, there is incredible amount of removing traumas that can happen in very short time. So the way I work with the medicine and the way I see these plants, I trust there is a divine calling. I trust that there is a divine kind of like energy that wants to align to what we already are. So in the Buddhist tradition would be like, we are already, we are healed, we are already perfect, we have forgotten. And there is a part of us that is always going to be pulling towards healing. Even when we do crazy things, there's a part of us that is always going to be kind of like pulling towards healing. And I feel like as humans right now, this unconscious part of us that is pulling towards healing is looking for these medicines. And I feel very strongly that these medicines are coming to us because we need them at this time. The most important for me is how we can make this process of connection between indigenous people, between these sacred medicines, between Western people, the most safe possible, without condemning. I think like I am not any person that is going to condemn the industry or how, if the person has the right intention. Who am I to say you have the right intention, you are not having the right intention? I cannot say what happens if somebody comes with curiosity and decides to have an ayahuasca ceremony that day, if that is not the way for them to change their life. So for me, it's like, what can I do so I can minimize harm? So people can come to the medicine feeling prepared as they can, and knowing what is a harmful place, where should we go, especially for women, what interactions are not okay, what is, that is kind of like the most important thing for me. I'm pretty practical, so, and and like releasing trauma, talking from the lenses of trauma healing, talking from the lenses of deep connection between us and nature and our deeper self. That is the most important for me. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. That's it.
You go first? Sure. Okay. Well, I am deeply impressed. There has been a lot of profound wisdom that has been shared today, and I'm honestly a little bit surprised. And it's also occurred to me how much we can have in common and still have points of divergence that are not merely minor points of faith or differences of practice. I come from a lineage of the mysteries a lot of people refer to as Illuminism. And just for example, we are not friendly to the idea of inculcating Christianity into the mysteries and the impulse of the gnosis. So it really struck me as interesting that we had so many profoundly common points. In fact, there's little even left for me to say, in a way, because I agree so much with much of the rest. And I think that it's sort of poetic, in a sense, that one of the reasons we're here is this necessity to integrate sometimes opposing traditions. And so my background, before I was a YouTuber, I was an outlaw pot grower. And before that, I was born into biker gangs and violence and no indoor plumbing, and lived outside of society pretty much my entire life. And when the marijuana industry collapsed, the outlaw industry in Northern California, I went to Ecuador. And as a child, I'd become very fascinated with the Amazon, particularly the Shuar and Warani people, who I ended up living with totally accidentally. And at one point, I never desired to become a shaman. I didn't want to become a facilitator. I've never been to a retreat. I would never go to a retreat. I started drinking with a Czech shaman who had been working with a Shuar shaman, and they do not advertise to this day. You will not find them on the internet. You will never visit a retreat. You will never hear my teacher's, my original teacher's name. His teacher's name is Miguel Chiriop, and he doesn't mind. He's on a little bit on YouTube and stuff. But I did not ask for an apprenticeship. I did not pay anyone. They still only charge $30 or $40 per person for ceremony. So I have this perspective of being kind of outside of society and then completely naive to the ayahuasca industry. But I've been studying plant medicine book studies since I was in 6th grade because of the accidental introduction of a book about plant medicine into the elementary school library. So I've been looking at this since there was no ayahuasca industry, which has revealed a lot in terms of things people claim to be traditional that are not, and people that maybe have, say, a vegan agenda that have maybe set the tone for what is believed to be standardized protocol that absolutely is not. So those sort of distortions. But I'm aware that I got very lucky, that I feel like I found an avenue into ayahuasca that had not been influenced by the outside world. And some of the things that have struck me listening to this today is that we talk about creating a sort of initiatory process that's absent, partly due to profit motive. People don't want to tell their clients, you need to wait a year before you come to the retreat. 2 weeks dieta. No, 2 years. 2 years. No sex, no meat. 2 years, not 2 weeks. This is going to do almost nothing. And so, just kind of making that point there, that you can sort of spot these things if you're paying attention. And what I'm getting at, though, is that for the Shuar, who are, they were a very warlike tribe. They were never conquered by the Inca. They were never conquered by the conquistadors. They were never conquered by the Ashwar. They were never conquered by anyone. And their initiatory process would probably kill most of the people in this room. And so when we talk about how we're going to adapt our culture to, acclimatize ourselves properly in the preparatory stages to this medicine, we cannot generally do it in the way that the Shuar would. That's not an option for most of us. You are not going to acquire your arutam by drinking tobacco at 8 years old by the waterfall for 4 days. You are not going to drink datura when you're 13. You're not going to do that. You can't do that. You're well past that point. So we have to have our own processes. And so the syncretism is derived from study and determination and objectivity, willingness to look past narratives and to confront possibly uncomfortable truths. But I think what I can offer that could be helpful is that we have to look at substitutes, and we have to scale them to what is appropriate for people from Western culture. And that is the answer, I think, that a lot of the mystery traditions provide. The mystery traditions really are a sort of repository of techniques of esotericism from all over the world that have been collected under a sort of generic banner. And I think that, for my part, encouraging people to look there for the resources that we need to make a proper integration with these absolutely essential and integral medicines, that's probably our best bet. And it's an awfully interesting coincidence to me that at least 3 of us are heavily immersed in that kind of point of view. In fact, for those of you that don't know this, Freemasons are still buried to this day with a leaf from the acacia tree, 33rd degree Freemasons, that contains DMT as a gateway to the spirit world. And so it's very likely that the kykeon that was consumed by Plato and other ancient Greeks, I mean, how do you think they figured out what an atom was, an indivisible unit of matter? They saw it because they drank a plant containing DMT. In the Eleusinian Mysteries, in the inner circle, the Apoptiae was a group of individuals that had this plant, and they were considered basically the shamans and the leaders in exactly the same way as the Shuar, which was really strange. They're also very secretive about their practices, and the parallels were enormous and tremendous. And that is something I should also mention, that we can look for practices and ideas, archetypes that are ubiquitous. So if you are going to have an ayahuasca ceremony, you are creating a circle. If you are in the Western Mystery Temple, you're creating a circle. If you are a Druid, you're creating a circle. If you are Wiccan, you're creating a circle. And that circle defines the energies that are in your universe and repels those forces which are not supposed to be. There's almost always an acknowledgement of the 4 directions. So that's another tool in our bag, is the ability to find these commonalities and integrate them into new systems. It's certainly true that shamanism and the mystery tradition, another thing they have in common, is that their objective is for the individual to realize their sovereignty and innovation. My teacher, the Shuar teacher, would tell me not to watch the hands of my master, not to imitate his songs, to find my own songs, to learn the basic techniques, but to do them in my own way. And so one of the negative side effects, I think, of the ayahuasca industry is that people have become very imitative. There is a sort of misconception that shamanism is some standardized protocol that everyone does the same way, and I've actually watched outsiders come and be suspicious of shaman that are totally traditional because they're traditional, and they have read on the internet that things are supposed to be some other way. So
that leaves me. Wow, it's been it's quite amazing listening to all the different people and being here and hearing everybody's different takes on medicine and how it works. And my name is Sean West. I've been working with medicines since the early 90s. And I've definitely come into medicines in a very not traditional way. I definitely was one of these people that was very suspicious of, if it's old, has it been adapted to now? And basically I'm a trauma release therapist. My main work is body work. That's trauma release body work. And and I kind of reflected that right into the medicine. And for me, the medicine, all the medicines I work with, Huachuma, Ayahuasca, especially those, and then also body work, meditation, they're about going in, and I always felt and worked with the medicine in a way that it's for illuminating into a person. It's not that important visions in celestial realms and things like this. It's more important that the person comes into contact with their trauma from their life, and even work with the collective trauma, and the idea of trauma being, and what medicine can do is that it allows us to feel that trauma and be in that trauma, which is all that trauma wants, and it helps it to be realized, honored, loved, respected. Trauma then resolves into wisdom inside of ourselves. And I see, especially ayahuasca, I do very focused one-on-one ceremonies or very, very small groups, and I feel like the deeper it goes, the more it helps everybody. So like just one person doing something very deep with the medicine and coming into contact with ancestral trauma, with their trauma, can help everybody. And I've definitely very influenced by Shipibo tradition. I like the way Shipibos use sound, Ikaro. Very eclectic though. I'm also very into Dharma. I like Dharma, it makes sense. I tend to be very eclectic. I like to draw from all different traditions what seems to make sense, and what brings with it the concepts of loving yourself, feeling your heart, and connection with other humans, like finding connection with others is a very important aspect, especially working with medicines. And I found, I question even the idea of maestro in a ceremony. Like, I'm very accessible during a ceremony. Like, people can talk, they can ask for light. It's about creating a comfortable zone where people can feel like they can really dive deeper. And for me, the real true work is this working with this collective trauma that humanity is carrying in it, all of us. And I think this is the work of the medicine. And relying on old traditions to guide us isn't always going to work, because we're now. This is now, and it's a very powerful now. We're at a turning point in the history of humans. We're all very connected and very aware, and there's a deeper awareness. Even just the common human is even more aware of the plight of other humans, and like the ideas are like this, that we are starting to even, like, I was born in 64, and through the 70s, if you even mentioned the word trauma, they said, like, what's wrong with you? You're like weird, and like this whole concept is now, like, you'll hear a redneck from Oklahoma say, yeah, I got trauma, and it's like, so things have really shifted, and I think, like, it's really important, these medicines being available, they're okay. It's, I often, people come to me and ask for medicine. I ask, why do you want to take medicine, How are you doing, And like, what's your intention with this? Why do you want to take medicine? And I think those are good questions. And as much preparation as people will do, I'm totally into that. Like, don't smoke pot. Don't, have a clean diet. Let's get you into the ceremony as clean as possible so that the medicine can work really deep with you. And I found that, like, I like all these, everything I'm hearing is sounding really great. And I think that one of the things, commonalities that I'm seeing, like, for actually good ceremonial work is connection and compassion And these things are more important than even the music that is played or the ceremony that's, made. It's good to call in the directions. I call in the directions. I call in benevolent energies with a lot of gratitude. I don't ask for protection. I always feel that things come that need to be worked with in the space, and everything's welcome. And that's like one of the aspects of like medicine that I think is very coming to be and being a modern aspect of medicine, is the idea that non-adversarial healing is the way to go. Creating an adversary, creating an entity, creating something that needs to be extracted or something that's coming from outside of you to attack you or any of these things is useless. It's not working. I've been watching it for 30 years. It's not working, and so like the idea of integrating becomes much deeper from that standpoint. Like we integrate our dark side, we integrate every aspect of ourselves, we accept love, honor, respect, all these things. And through that we really shift the perspective on things, and we finally really work with the fear and the idea that fear is a thing to be going into and something to be resolved through going into it and facing it. These kind of concepts are new in a lot of ways. I mean, I like find the Shipibo maestro that I most resonate with, he's really different than the other Shipibos. Like there's so much variation in tradition. And I like his concepts about I'm just vibrating things with my Icaro and getting things to loosen up so that you can get flow and connection. Voila. Nothing more. It's not about anything deeper than that. And I do like to follow this tradition of the Shipibo. I like very much using Icaros and sound, as well as like the Daimistas also work with sound and vibration and this concept. And in this community, it's the beautiful thing, the nature of the Daimistas is that they have this community and this connection. And Andrew knows all of his people, and like he knows them by name, and it's a very beautiful. This is for me, important, and this is like that he's bringing this into the now is important. And the idea of initiation, it's people are coming. I have a tendency to be like, come as you are, you will work with that, and so I think it's great to have all different possibilities with the medicine. People become attracted to what they want to work with mostly, and the connection that they have with that person that they're going to work with, I think is actually the most important thing. So I really, I feel like, it's evolving medicine. It's not a set deal at all, and even anybody who brings a dogma or a set concept into medicine, they're always going to be limited, to how deep that work is going to be. Because, what I have found working with ayahuasca, for example, or even Huachuma, is the idea that every person is unique and every situation is new. Every time is a completely new adventure. If you're not questioning yourself in the middle of giving a ceremony, then maybe you're a little bit overconfident. There's always this question, like, is this, and listening and connection to this person to work with them. And I think that, with modern trauma therapy, people like Gabor and many people coming into like deeper understanding of what trauma is and how to work with it, and there's a lot of books you can read, there's a lot of information out there, but finally it's experience, and that's like, I think, one of the most important aspects when seeking or working with anybody with medicine is like look at who's been working with it, and who has experience with working with trauma, and having trauma come up in a space, and the idea of just being really open to that. Also, that trauma is okay, it's like, yes, that's what our work is. I mean, I call my work trauma release. Like, I work with a very strong ayahuasca, a red ayahuasca that's really different every time you take it. It's such a beast, but the idea and the intention is always to go for that collective, for that personal trauma to come, and that seems to be what seems to help, like to bring the person into connection with the divine, with whatever their spiritual calling is. Creating this connectivity to that involves resolving the charge around trauma. And so I'm a very big trauma is where we go and what we work on. I'm kind of meandering around. So I feel like, that it's evolving, it's getting better. Pisac now, I've been here 14 years. It's so much more grounded now than it was 14 years ago. The medicine work, people are becoming more discerning. They're starting to say, okay, this guy says he's going to heal me. All right, red flag, I'm not going to work with that. That's not, yeah. The idea that, all medicine, all work is about, any kind of work with medicine involves changing your lifestyle, changing the way you behave, what you think, controlling your mental content. Working with these things in your day-to-day life are much more important than taking a lot of medicine. And, coming into contact with people that are encouraging you to heal yourself also is a very important aspect. It's like, you're going to heal you. Nobody's going to heal you. The medicine is not going to heal you. And we can see the medicine is definitely, it's got intelligence. It's alive, but it's not ethical. It does not judge who is serving it. And like, I've watched people without ethic work with medicines forever until they die, It's like, she just like loves all her little creatures, dark and nasty and light and big and small. She's like the Pachamama, she loves everything. And so definitely like the actual ethics of the person working with the medicine are actually one of the biggest players in all of this. And I think that, a piece of advice when you seek to work with medicine, it's like, ask yourself, why am I seeking to work with medicine? What is this that I wish to resolve? And also have a really good look at who you're going to take medicine with, because that's really important. Like the old psychonauts, like Leary and etc. Them, the idea of like who and where and what kind of space are you taking these medicines in. These are important aspects, and knowing and having a connection, a human connection to whoever you're going to work with medicine with. It's like, I feel like definitely one of the limitations of some of the indigenous traditions is the idea the maestro is there, he's kind of unapproachable. It's difficult to communicate during the ceremony with certain people giving ceremonies, and this is completely like, this is not for me like modern, like this is what we have to offer as a modern shamanic or facilitator tradition, is the idea of accessibility to the person and feeling of human connection. The connection is the biggest container, it's like that contains space. Compassion also, this real compassion from the person serving, the compassion of the people in the space for each other, and the connection. Everybody that sits in a medicine space should know each other's names. They should know what they're working with. Like, that's why like it's difficult for me to even do large groups, because the retreats want it to happen in this kind of space and like this time period. And like for me, it's so important that all these people that are going to sit together, they just got to talk to each other for hours and get to know each other and know what's coming into the space to do work. And I keep it simple by working one-on-one, in small groups. This is, I find, a much easier way to work with medicines. But I think I'm really excited to meet Harley and Jeanette and hear Andrew, and I think that all the things that they're describing and talking about, definitely, these are ways in, these are ways to approach and be in the medicine. I tend to be very simple, keep it simple, silly, and kiss. And but I also recognize the necessity for some people to have like deeper conscious structures to work with, and that's all good too. And I think, but finally, what guides it all is just like what's happening from intention, heart, and connection. I think I can't think of anything else to say.
We'll open it up because we're running a bit behind. So I think if you speak from back there, we may not catch it on the mic.
No, it will.
It will? Okay.
Yeah.
It's jumping around.
Maybe I have two questions. The first one is why do you think that in the shamanic practices and traditions it evolved like there is no direct personal compassionate connection in ceremonies between the participant and the shaman?
Oh, that's really interesting. So if we look at shamanic tradition, small villages, a shaman, addressing a certain problem, it's kind of like a doctor. There's like a kind of removed, kind of analyze the problem and fix the problem. And this is kind of like what is it called? It's old. It's a concept. It fit into its context thousands of years ago. The kind of people that were like working with that, and also the power of suggestion, and but now people are not so much like that. They're much more open and informed, And so I think, now, especially, we're coming to realize that yes, our culture is, all culture on this planet, human culture is traumatized. It's been a rough 10,000 years. It hasn't been going well. And, maybe I feel like we're coming out of that. But I think also that there's been a development in the concept that, Jungian even, Jung really brought this, bringing into the concept that, yeah, you got to be friends with this person that you're going to work with to help them heal. It's about connection, more connection, and not so much there's an evil spirit after you, so we're going to do this and fix it, and you're okay now.
So it's more like a therapeutic relationship.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. That's a great way of putting it.
I would have said that it's the ayahuasca industry, honestly, because that's not really my experience. When with my first teacher, we had very small groups at first, and it was very intimate. He would go, and often he would come back and say, I have been consulting with spirit about your mother, and we would talk for 45 minutes. But then as his groups got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, even though he wasn't advertising, just word of mouth, we lost that connection. So I eventually stopped going and started working with his teacher because it wasn't, that wasn't happening. But I think that a lot of that has to do, the depersonalization has to do with the industrialization.
That is one of the issues I didn't even mention. It's definitely, for me, I find my work with the ayahuasca, therapeutic work, is really enhanced by the fact that I don't depend on that money. People pay me for my time, and I kind of extrapolate what kind of I lose the whole next day, so I can't do body work that whole day. So how much do I charge? And so I charge this, and I charge to help pay for the medicine. But I'm not trying to support a lifestyle or anything with the medicine work. And I find that really loosens things up, and I see that with the daimi work also. It's not about the money. And that is an issue, We get professional ayahuasqueros, even shipibos, very interested in the money. And I've worked with the shipibos, helping them put together ceremonies and stuff, and it's kind of startling how into the money they are. And I see, that definitely creates an in-person, it's like the salesperson, the vendor relationship that's not so clear. And that's definitely one of the big aspects of the whole ayahuasca industry. There's a lot of money being made by doing big ceremonies, for example.
So I understand that before 200 years, it was not like that. It was a personal
It
connection.
was more like what she was talking about. It's like they would just the first. Sorry.
No,
I mean, the
It's like-
shaman would take the medicine, and the person would sit there and be healed. You know.
Also, we have to think our context. We are coming as foreigners to the shaman. So first, there is a cultural barrier, there is a language barrier, there is also this idea that the shaman, like reading Don Juan, the shaman is the teacher. So there is this barrier. The shaman in their community is the uncle, is the fisherman, is the friend. It is a different context. So we have to also take in account this who we are. So who we are for the indigenous person.
So it also correlates for me to relates to the fact that you said that the diet is 2 years maybe, and in these 2 years I assume you live within the community and create this personal relationship.
Even more importantly, if you consider the traditional role of a shaman, like they were both saying that the shaman drank the medicine and worked on the patient. And all the years that I've been involved with ayahuasca, I have seen one person that still works that way. And so, aside from that, even if you have like the shwar, for example, it's not really like everyone drinks together, but everyone has drank. There are the girls drink for autotune to a certain kind. But anyways, the kofan, for example, have collective ceremonies. But the shaman has known every single person since they were born. He knows all their traumas, he knows their parents' traumas, he knows everything about them. He has a deep, profound, intimate relationship. And we have this idea in the commercial industry that you're supposed to stay cocooned up and like not let people in your energy space, and then you're going to get together with 150 strangers and drink. They could be, the worst imaginable kind of people carrying, whatever. And so this makes sense somehow that we're doing this. It's absolutely not okay. The whole idea, and people will say, well, you can have a shaman that can. No, they'll have like one shaman, and if he was really or she was really absorbing all of the crap from 150, even 300 people I've heard of, they would die. They would just drop dead on the spot. There's no way that there's 6 facilitators who don't know anything about shamanism and one shaman are cleansing the space for 150 people. It's not happening.
And I've seen that. I worked for 9 years in a ceremonial space here that would have 100 people in the space taking a very strong ayahuasca. And it was a psycho circus.
And then we wonder why there are all these ego inflations and, like just people going nuts in the weeks and months after the retreats. And it has a lot to do with the fact that they're being exposed to all sorts of stuff. So.
And it's super important, like if somebody is going to be going to a ceremony, that the person is facilitating the ceremony come to you and has a screening process. Because the person that is the work that I have been doing for many years. It's like we want to know if this person if the medicine is going to be good for them. Because the medicine is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. There will be so many people that even they are curious, they have a call, but their mental stability, their physical state, their intentions are not aligned, and it could be even worse.
Oh, yeah.
So for the people that are going to be drinking medicine, there has to be a screening process. There has to be an interest from the person that is serving you medicine to just don't serve you like that. Mm-hmm. Because it's out of their own interest, out of my interest to don't have stable people, out of your interest to have a person that cares for you, and out of the interest for these plants. Because what happens if things go really bad? They become what people think about ayahuasca. Makes you crazy, this is a drug, this is that. And it's very important to us as community that work with this medicine, take care of the safety of the whole name of these traditions. These, as I think you were saying, these traditions have a time for thousands of years. Like the first ayahuasca cup was like found 3,000, have a date of 3,000 years. So this is being passed over and over again for for many generations, and we are now the guardians of these medicines. Before it was indigenous person, the same tribe, perhaps like always moving and changing because culture is like that. So even though it was different tribes. There is also different ways of working with the medicine. But right now, we are the medicine holders. We are the medicine carriers, and I think like we all have the responsibility of taking that wisdom with a lot of respect.
Thank you so much. So maybe it's a pretty long question. Just another question. Sean, you mentioned that
I would like to just give other people a chance because it's a large group. So if we can come back to your question and just open it up, I think that would be. So if there is anybody else who has something to add or to ask.
While we're on the subject, actually, one thing that I think may be a serious problem that no one seems to be addressing is that I am not necessarily of the opinion that anyone can just become a shaman. And now we have the situation where we have schools where you can just go and pay, and then you have an apprenticeship. And, you know, I hesitate to take this position because it sort of puts me on a pedestal and others like me, I guess. But as far as I can tell, my dialogue with the universal mind started as a child. It's not really normal. And with the Shuar and a lot of other groups, you were chosen not even to be a shaman, but even to learn about the plants. Only the most intelligent and together. And so I think also the proliferation of this sort of idea that anyone can just go pay and drink ayahuasca and become a shaman is also causing a lot of train wrecks. So.
And I would like to just add briefly that I think it's not just an issue about the ayahuasca industry. I mean, this is part of this, contemporary spiritual matrix. People can go on a weekend and supposedly learn breathwork and become breathwork facilitators. And there's this proliferation of these bullshit certificates, which anybody can do in a short amount of time, and declare themselves to be a master. So I think this it's part of this contemporary world. It's not it's not specific to this industry, but the specificity is that it's a lot more dangerous.
The whole culture's going off the rails on the Wuchu train.
What is a shaman at its core? Just at the purest level, what is a shaman?
In one sentence, it is a person who has established a dialogue with the universal mind and has developed the discernment to distinguish between wish demons and thoughts and actual intuitions and communications. And it is also someone that knows how to dance with doubt. Because if you are overconfident, you can make a lot of mistakes. And you have to know that you can always be wrong about everything. That's one of the other prerequisites, I think, for operating well in that context. So.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you want to say something else, since I think it's part of your focus. How do you define shaman?
Well, a shaman has always gone through a period of initiation where they've died to a kind of materialistic consciousness and have been reborn into a consciousness of the mysteries of the spiritual world. They've usually, almost always, I think, had to pass through a near-death experience or a very severe illness. And they've almost always had to go to infernal regions and deal with darkness and sickness and pain and suffering. They've almost always had to go through some experience of soul retrieval, whether it be for themselves and or the culture that they're working for. They work as mediators, and they're human beings that specialize in mediating between the culture and the mysteries of the spiritual world and the forces of the spiritual world. So they're standing in this space in between as messengers, as mediators, and as guides to the soul. That's generally how I think of it, and I think every culture has its own version of it because it's an archetypal impulse that emerges to meet the needs of the culture. So if there's a culture that's going through, I don't know, if there's an agricultural culture that relies on the rainfall for the survival of the culture, then the shamans would evolve ways of calling the rain. But in our case, in Western civilization, we have experienced serious trauma and serious soul loss, and so the kind of new generation of Western shamans need to specialize in refinding what we've lost and what's been taken from us, this direct connection to the spirit, and that's why entheogens are an integral part of the Western experience, and why so many Westerners are feeling this innate call to entheogens. But once they take it, it initiates this shamanic initiation process. So I do agree, not everybody can be shamans. Only like extraordinary individuals can actually successfully cross the many trials and the many difficulties of the initiation process. But I still see shamanism as a universal archetype that can awaken in anybody and inspire people in different kinds of ways. There's different aspects to the shamanic archetype. Some people can be artists, for example, and so their shamanic work is to have visions and paint their visions. That's a form of shamanism. Yeah, a form of a shamanic impulse, I would say, because they're translating, acting as mediums. Other people can become psychotherapists. That's another modern manifestation of the shamanic impulse. Because they're guiding souls into the unconscious regions, into the lower astral regions of their own unconscious for soul retrieval work. One particular facet of the shamanic impulse that's incredibly active here and that we're all talking about is technicians of entheogenic ceremony. But that is not the only thing that shamans do. But this is an important impulse and manifestation of the shamanic archetype. Like, not everybody that works with entheogens is a shaman, but if you want to work with entheogens, you want to work with a shaman. That's how I feel. But it's a universal impulse, I feel. But there's a difference between people being inspired by the shamanic impulse and people that are becoming shamans. I think very few can actually pull that off successfully. Do I think I believe in illumination? Yeah. Well, this is something that entheogens that ideally used can bring us. Is like that's what is implied by the name entheogen, is something which generates the indwelling of the divine. And ideally we take these entheogens to bring this divine presence inside of us and experience it inside of us. And this is an interesting question of and it's something that you said that I'm kind of debating in myself. But this question of, do we really have everything we need inside of us already? Or do we actually need to bring something outside of us into ourselves in order for us to evolve? And it's really interesting because I think both are true. I take an entheogen in order to call this divine presence inside of myself, because it's something that kind of exists in germ form inside of myself, but I want it to grow more and more and more and more and become really permanent inside of me. So it's I've experienced moments of illumination in an entheogenic state, but I think I'm working so hard and so consistently to keep growing that and making that more permanent and bear fruit inside of me. So we all have various degrees of illumination, but I think it's possible through the right initiatory practices to make it grow and bear lots of fruit, like a tree that grows big and then bears lots of fruit.
How we can, as a space holder, know if we are ready to treat a person, to give him medicine or to treat him. And it's an interesting point, and at the same time you can't really put a frame with really close boundaries, because even if you do a formal questionnaire, for example, most of the people they discover their childhood trauma after they are 30 years old and because they train plants.
I think
So there is a space of humbleness and intuition.
Absolutely, and time and practice. In order for me to, I live at the Temple of the Way of Life for 3 years before entering into holding a space with a shaman, facilitating with a shaman. But it took me at least 200 ceremonies, sitting and serving and observing, because the idea is that you take it in yourself, do it, practicing yourself for a long time before even dreaming about serving, because you will see what happened within yourself. Then when there is a time, and your own self will tell you, like, okay, there is a time that I could apprentice and go deeper and perhaps like support somebody for a long time before going into serving oneself, and which is a state that I am not interested in. I'm interested more in supporting and holding a space. But I think it's takes time. It takes a lot of time.
Also, we're in like a new frontier with indigenous shamans serving Westerners.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
welcome to the West, and
Also, what I have seen in many indigenous, they will come like ceremony tonight, everybody welcome without any screening process.
Yes. And also, to add to this element of the syncretism, also without having psychological background. I mean, it's, you're in a different context of serving Westerners that have histories of depressions and trauma. And I think there is a certain element of knowing how to do shadow work, and when I worked with Shipibo, if something came up in the ceremony, they blew something and they did an extraction, and from my own perspective, it doesn't work, even if you're having entity attachments and you believe that they're real, it's because you have that energy in yourself, and to have somebody just, say, I've taken it out, it doesn't deal with the root of the problem. So I think, having these combinations and, these fruitful encounters where you have somebody who is maybe a master of that particular technology, but is not a master of, psychology, Jungianism, doesn't understand archetypes and shadow. It's really, it doesn't understand how to do integration. I've been to so many ceremonies that it's like, okay, you drink, it's 12 o'clock, go home now. So I think there is a lot of benefit that can be brought from people that are coming from different traditions, have different expertises, and are working together.
Yeah, because we have to remember that the world of indigenous people in the jungle is completely different from our world. A person will go because they have a snake bite, or somebody was putting like black magic on them, when a Western will come with addiction, with different type of traumas. So there has to be a bridge, and that is why it's so important to have like facilitators that can be the bridge, that can explain, that have a foot in two worlds in a way, and can be transmitting the information in a way that Western person could understand it and will benefit.
So we run quite out of time. You have one question. You have your hand up.
Oh yeah. I was curious about, as facilitators, how do you balance staying centered and connected while being part of the Western world and all of that busyness in life?
Well, in my case, the tradition that I work in, it's kind of like a Western tradition already, so it's built in. So, like, the way that we work is kind of designed that we don't need to take like days off the following days to do integration. Like, the integration is kind of like built into the ceremonial structure. So this is an example of like a ceremonial ritual and shamanic impulse that is emerging out of Western civilization to be calibrated to the unique needs of Western civilization. Like, I don't get paid for the ceremonial work I do. It's nonprofit, so I have to have my day job. So I do my work, I do my ceremonies, and then the next day I have to get up early in the morning and go to work. And so for me, it's like built into the way that the ceremonies are structured, that I don't need to spend time doing integration work.
Well, if I can add, I mean, yes, that's how the daimyo works.
He does it too.
But it takes, for example, to me, it took more or less 1.5 years to build the state of health to be able to finish the work at 7 a.m. and then 8 a.m. I have to be the dad and stay with my daughter and function as a dad. But all the first year and a half, I had to take a full day off after the work. Like, after the spiritual work, I needed my own physical day off before functioning.
But you stuck with it, and then you learned how to...
Yes, no, at a certain point I was able to get in more in the current of the flow of the daime, so be more, balance more the spiritual work and the material work. That's
I don't know what a mortgage is for sure. I have never had a bank account. I have not had a utility in my name since I was 17 years old. I've never seen my credit score. I just don't participate in Western society except for through that laptop to the extent that I have to, live streaming and making YouTube videos. So maybe that's cheating or something, but
So different ways. For me, like everything is integrated. There is no separation between a spiritual world and daily life. And as having as base, the base in the Buddha's teachings, like the base is ethics. So carrying these same ethics in every single aspect of my life and carrying presence. The first one is like ethics, and the second one is mindfulness. And everything that we are experimenting every single day is just changing and moving. And how do we attend to every single aspect of life with which type of way we see life, with which type of in which type of way we engage with life. Doesn't really matter if you are tending a person crier or if you are doing your business. It's just the way of presence, the way of being in the now and allowing the now to just move through you in a way.
I think if you use a very strong, like if you receive a very strong dose of ayahuasca and it really does bring about an ego death, then there's a long recovery that's implied from that. I think a lot of it depends on like the technique of how you're working with the entheogens. Like if you just obliterate your ego, then there's a huge long reintegration process to like reconstitute your ego, which is like your interface with the world. So like in our works, like we don't actually drink massive amounts. Like we drink enough that we can still function and still like be conscious. Like we don't like turn the lights off and close our eyes and astral travel. Like we don't like relinquish the ego. We keep working in the space of our ego. And I think in our case, that's why there's not a lot of integration needed afterwards.
also I want to have a simple worker, which I do. Most of my patients came from trauma release, knowing or unknowing. It's always changing the memory of the body. Like if you want to change posture, you have to change the body memory and the attitude. And my experience, every now and again, I need to take a break from the work to put my life more together. There are periods where I function, I'm centered enough to hold space for other people's trauma and process, and periods where it's better not. And I guess the more you get experience and centered as a human being, as a shaman, you can hold more space more frequently. But it's not something I will start counting as a job to sustain your life in a stable way in your life. Like I'm also expanding into side business that doesn't mean to be super centered as hold space for the people from. That's what I'm learning in my day-to-day, honestly.
And one thing is important, like I firm believer in not working over and over and over and over again with the medicine. It's something that I have done, and I have seen like retreat after retreat after retreat. It actually doesn't help because there is so much things that happen in one ceremony that needs to be kind of like fully embodied.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I prefer to have like one ceremony and like let it rest and let it embody, let it sink in, and then when there is like some call to do it again, okay, let's do it again. But not too much is not good.
In your work, is there strong services, like very strong medicine where people are like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
that's what, yeah.
For many years, I worked with ayahuasca, and it used to be 7 ceremonies, like shipibos, and I used to work with shipibos. And as facilitator, we used to have a lot of retreats, and then we realized, like, actually, is too many is not better. Less is more. Even less quantity is more than actually having people blasting out without being present.
Yeah.
So now it's like
They can't
refining
work.
into presence.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Can we settle up our bills if we have them open? Anyone that has an open tab, which would be me. Am I the only one? He just asked me to ask everyone to settle up their bills if you have one, but I guess he was.
You're not cheating the system.
I'm the only one.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yes.
Thank you. So, both you and Sean mentioned threshold, like the purpose of the ceremony or so, of the ayahuasca. There is a purpose, and like Sean, you mentioned the purpose is illuminating your traumas and healing them, and right? I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken? And you mentioned a few thresholds, a few purposes, and like I wanted to ask, like for me currently, like I feel that the traumas that I had in my consciousness, I've healed already with these ceremonies, and nowadays I do them more. There are more spaces between the ceremonies, but I do feel that I have. Still a lot more work to do to learn how to handle life, to channel my energies, to find my passion, etc., etc. So I wanted to ask you guys, like, what is the purpose? What are the thresholds? Like, is it only trauma healing, or are there the next stages?
I mean, for me, once you've worked with your life trauma, then you're working the collective. It's service. It's service to the collective trauma. And that's you just working, that's, and I heard this concept before I even understood this concept, work the collective trauma. But it's really real. Like you can, whatever culture, whatever maternal line you're coming down, whatever ancestry you have, once you've dealt with your life trauma and embodied it and accepted it and integrated it as wisdom, then there's like the whole collective thing, and there's lots of that. And so
Well, how do you work on that? Because like
you just keep going.
Before I started doing ayahuasca, I told myself, I'm doing this work now to heal myself, so I could be able to be of service to others, to heal humanity by the means of healing myself first. This is the first step. But how do you work on the collective trauma?
First, you have to align with your true will, is how we talk about it. So you have to, the idea is that every component of the universe was created for some kind of purpose. The law of necessity is almost God. Everything that happens because it has to happen. And so you have to happen. And it could be because we're in a culture that doesn't prioritize this knowledge, or any other number of reasons, but we have to, through various methods like healing your traumas, getting out of your own way, and then really devoting to self-education and self-development and really becoming centered in yourself. And there are a lot of methods and a lot of paths, and probably 100 of them you could name to me, but finding some combination of them that suits you in order to align yourself with your fundamental purpose. And then through that fundamental purpose, if you correctly align yourself with it, you will find that you have automatically aligned yourself with the collective purpose. So it's like if you do things properly, it will just sort of organically, you're part of a bunch of patterns, then there are all these different orders of symmetry. And so if you get into the flow of these patterns, then you will find yourself in homeostasis with your environment, because that's the natural tendency for all systems in the universe.
it's natural.
I think once you've like really addressed your own karma, it's like time to take a bodhisattvic oath. And I have this narrative. I do kind of like narrative magic with this. Like I have this narrative that really seems to work. It says if you understand that the traumas you had to go through, your karma is concealed in the traumas that you already had to face, and if you unravel that, it's your mission, it's your service. And so I think there's like, it's encoded into your trauma somehow. That's like your unique, specific initiation. And so you get your curriculum by working on yourself. And now you're a specialist in helping a certain sort of person who's gone through something similar to what you've gone through. So if you really look at like, this is where your specialization comes from. And that's what earns you the right to actually try to help other people, because you've successfully helped yourself. So like if you look at what's specific about the traumas that you've had to go through, that's where you start. I don't advise like saying, okay, now I'm gonna like work to save humanity. It's like, no, now I'm gonna work to help other people that have gone through some stuff that I've gone through. And it starts from there. So I think that your wounded healer curriculum is already encoded into your work of self-trauma, and that's your initiation process into service.
I want to add something.
Let's break for a moment because we're running over time. So I also wanted to add something. I feel like I've been waiting for now. I think it depends on your personal lessons that you have to learn, but there's also something objective, and that has to do with the model. So, there's a level in which you're working with the physical body and the etheric body, which is a double. There's a level in which you're working with the emotional and astral body, and on that level there is trauma. And you can say, yeah, in my childhood I suffered this, and I've worked with it in this process and on this level, and I have forgiven. Somebody has done something wrong to me, but I have forgiven. On a transpersonal level, which is the collective, there is nothing to forgive. So it's a different stage in which you start to take self-responsibility and see that everything that has been created is this dance that's orchestrated by your soul, that you came together with certain people to experience things that were unpleasant, abuse, and what we call trauma. And from that level, which is the level of the collective unconscious, which is the level in which you start to take responsibility for everything, there is no trauma. There is karma. And there is karma, and you can say, we've come into this dance together for me to understand this karma and to release it. And to speak about the levels of initiations, there's a fourth level, which is the level of the impersonal. And on that level, there is no karma. There's just you and I are the same being. We're playing this dance together to experience it. So I think it's important to understand that it's like a spiral. And if you think you've cleared it on one level, it will come back. It will come back on a different level. And if you've cleared it on that level, it will still keep coming back. So it's a process that keeps evolving. And it's also kind of good to know where you are, because from personal confession, I think, I thought I had cleared certain traumas, and, I hadn't. But this idea of levels, I think, is important, because, if somebody is like in a philosophy and in a mindset of non-duality, and is going to tell you, no, you're already enlightened, you've already achieved everything. Yes, from that level, from having one foot in eternity, there's nothing to be done. But from this other level in which we have one foot in time, it is a process, and it's constantly evolving up this spiral. So it's good to kind of know where you stand, and I think this is where, working with people who have had this experience, who have like this level of passing through the initiations, can be helpful. Because if you are going through self-initiation, it can be very self-deceptive sometimes, that you think you're in a certain place, but actually you're not.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I have noticed, and some of you were saying the same. It's like once we feel like this big kind of like gross trauma had been healed, then mind naturally inclines to support others, because it comes from like we have this Thai identity, this Thai ego, me. But these substances and these practices shows us that we actually are less me, this, and we are actually more interconnected than we think. And the most we tap into this interconnectedness, it just arises naturally that we are going to support one another. So in the Buddha's path, like, we kind of like understand deeper and deeper how we are not this one soul individual. Actually, it doesn't exist, one soul individual. We could think that, but that actually we are part of a whole wave of life. And the most that we just open that. Excuse me?
This is where the principle of compassion to others.
Absolutely, yeah. And it arises naturally when we start like breaking this Thai ego, this Thai persona.
One
Well, about how do you, like the passage from, let's say, patient healing his own trauma to facilitator to other people healing. I think normally often naturally you magnetize the people that needs your help and that you need their participation in your life. It doesn't matter if you're charging for your service or not, but there is a magnetic field that makes attract you the people that you need. In a bit of healthier and less intense way that victim and culprit, they attract each other to learn. Once it gets a bit more smoother, a bit more aware, you still attract the people you need to learn and that you are able to help, basically.
We are now about an hour over.
We should do this again.
Yes.
Okay.